Well, have you creeped your way into another interrogation room?
He apparently, according to what he says, fantasized about doing this for quite a long period of time.
Are you not an environmentalist, but still find yourself taking detectives on another hike through the woods?
So many attractive, naive girls hitchhiking in the Bay Area.
My, poor work ethic at its best.
He was too quiet sometimes, and he was always taking things, back and forth. Guns. He had guns.
Is that a shallow grave? Everybody knows you should only do 10 feet minimum. Just kidding. Repeat after me. No means no. No? Yes. In this segment of Eat the Snakes, we will be reviewing the horrific acts of Edmund Kemper III.
A serial killer's main attraction to their victim is dominance. No one knows for sure, but it is believed the fear and vulnerability displayed by a victim is an essential source of motivation for a serial killer. You might find yourself researching different templates and early characteristics of a serial killer. However, there is absolutely no way to determine who might one day become a serial killer, or how many bodies the friendly face next door has piled up. The definition of a serial killer is an individual who murders a series of victims over a period, typically with gaps between each killing. Some serial killers kidnap and torture their victims prior to murdering them. One might believe a serial killer and a gangbanger with multiple bodies under their belt fall into the same category. However, the two are separated by one word: motive. The definition of motive is a reason for doing something, especially one that is hidden or not obvious. The gangbanger's motive is clear. Their objective is to possess or repossess territory to perpetuate their criminal activities or retaliation in response to an inbound attack on one of their members. A serial killer's motive is far more complicated and at times hard to reveal. In this segment of Eat the Snakes, we will review serial killers and how you avoid being caught in their trap. There is a thin line between the thoughts and actions that may separate the norms of society from a serial killer. A huge factor is impulse control, a set of behaviors that help us think before acting. Impulse control allows us to prioritize our wants and needs and resist or avoid doing things that may be harmful to ourselves and others. The impulsive thoughts call for a ritual. The hunt and murder of his or her next victim is the act of fulfilling this ritual. Impulse control. The thoughts will never suffice, so they must be conducted physically.
Well, I'm not an expert. I'm not an authority. I'm someone who has been a murderer for almost 20 years.
Can you say how many people might be doing crimes like you were doing?
It would be a guess, but it's not. It's far more than 35. It isn't that impossible in this society.
Edmund Kemper III is the real-life serial killer played by Cameron Britton in the series Mindhunter. Edmund Kemper was born on December 18, 1948, in Burbank, California. He grew up in a troubled household, marked by his parents' turbulent relationship and frequent arguments. Kemper's mother, Clarnell, was emotionally abusive, often belittling and demeaning her son. Meanwhile, his father, Edmund Kemper II, was absent from his life, having divorced Clarnell when Edmund was just 9 years old. As a child, Kemper displayed a disturbing fascination with cruelty towards animals, a trait that psychologists often consider an early warning sign of potential violent tendencies. At the age of 10, he killed his sister's pet cat and buried it in his backyard. This act of violence towards a defenseless creature should have raised alarms, but unfortunately, it went unnoticed. The link between serial killers and animal cruelty during childhood is a topic that has been explored by researchers and psychologists. It is important to note that not all individuals who engage in animal cruelty during their childhood go on to become serial killers, and not all serial killers have a history of animal torture. However, there is evidence to suggest that there may be a psychological connection in some cases. Early warning signs. Animal cruelty, particularly when it involves torture or killing, is considered a red flag in the developmental history of individuals who later engage in violent behavior. It is often seen as an early warning sign of potential psychopathy or conduct disorder. This behavior can indicate a lack of empathy, a disregard for the suffering of others, and a propensity for violence. McDonaldian signs. The McDonald triad, proposed by psychiatrist J.M. McDonald, suggests that 3 behaviors in childhood may indicate an increased risk of violent behavior in adulthood. These behaviors are animal cruelty, fire setting, and persistent bedwetting beyond the age when it is considered developmentally appropriate. Although the triad has faced criticism, it has stimulated interest in the study of early warning signs for violent behavior. Kemper's dark fascination with death and dominance only escalated over time. He later confessed to decapitating his sister's dolls.
The obvious piece would actually be, I don't know if the story is true, that you beheaded one of your sister's doll and cut off the hands of the doll.
But very soon after getting back from that trip, she got in an argument with me. It was over something really petty. She got really outraged. She picked up that cat pistol. I said, "Don't throw that." And she threw it right at me. Wham, hard. It hit the floor and my toe, and it hurt bad. But it broke the gun, the inner mechanism. It wouldn't work after that. I picked it up. I found that out. It wouldn't cock and pull the trigger anymore. And that really outraged me. So I said, "So you want to play like that, huh?" So I go running into her room. She says, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" She's shrieking and chasing me, right? So I run into her room and I grab up her Barbie doll. It was the one fancy doll she had, the Barbie doll. Everybody has one, right? She had a pair of sewing scissors sitting there and a sewing machine, a sewing kit. I grabbed the scissors out. The head didn't decapitate, it pops off. So I popped that off. I said, "Well, that's going to go right back on. That's no damage." So I took the scissors and I cut the hands off the doll. I said, "Here, now you got a toy that doesn't work too good. I got a toy that doesn't work too good." That was my attitude. It wasn't quite just me going and, dismembering her doll. Again, I think that's a little bit too quick an assignation. It's not me to judge these professionals, but when they look at me here on Monday morning after the football game and they say, "Gee, here's all these little parts of the puzzle," oh, this indicates what he was going to do. And if that's the case, I want to know about the teenage kid or the preteen kids and the puberty, the pre and post-puberty kids. They're going through these raging moods and attitudes that go out and kill neighborhood cats. They hang them up from a telephone pole or hang them up from a tree, shoot them full of arrows and set fire to them. I was reading about that in Dear Abby. Where are those children today? Are they serial killers? Or are they police chiefs and mayors and aldermen and assemblymen?
It became clear that Kemper was not just a troubled child, but someone with deeply rooted psychological issues. In 1963, at the age of 14, Kemper's troubled behavior reached a tipping point. He runs away from home and commits his first serious crime. He steals a gun and ammunition and plans to kill his abusive grandmother, Maud Matilda Huey Kemper, whom he blamed for his mother's emotional torment. His attempt is unsuccessful, and he is apprehended by the police. Kemper spends the following years in a juvenile detention facility where he undergoes psychological evaluation and counseling. Unfortunately, despite the red flags, he is released at the age of 21, deemed no longer a threat to society. Doctors fail to recognize the true danger that Kemper poses. His thirst for violence was far from quenched. In the following years, he embarked on a grisly killing spree, targeting young women and leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. Kemper's modus operandi involved picking up vulnerable young hitchhikers, typically targeting college students. He would lure them into his car and then take them to secluded locations, where he subjected them to unimaginable horrors. Let us start with Kemper's grandparents, Edmund Kemper Sr. and Maud Matilda Huey Kemper. After Kemper's release from custody, unable to control his impulses, he targets those closest to him and reattempts an assault on his grandparents' lives. On August 27, 1964, after an argument over Ed's rifle, his grandparents discovered he had been killing birds and small animals and decided to take his rifle away. Edmund is infuriated and unable to reconcile with the thought of losing his tool of dominance, his rifle. He decides to murder his grandmother, Maud, while in her room asleep. He bludgeons her with a claw hammer, ending her life in a fit of rage. He would later state that he killed her because he wanted to know what it felt like.
It started coming to a head again, so I went back down. I ran away back down there. And then a month later, I'm up living with my grandparents in the mountains, and 10 months later, I murdered them.
Kemper's thirst for blood did not end there. Just a few hours after murdering his grandmother, he lures his grandfather, Edmund Kemper Sr., back to the family home. As Edmund Sr. walks through the door, he gets ambushed and shot in the head, killing him instantly. He would later claim the reason he killed his grandfather was because he did not want his grandfather to discover his grandmother's body. From helpless animals to humans, Ed's palate for flesh had evolved to shocking crimes that marked the beginning of Kemper's reign of terror, and they were merely a preview of the horrors that lay ahead. On May 7, 1972, Kemper picked up 18-year-old Mary and Pesci and 18-year-old Anita Lucchesa. In the quiet evening hours, the two young women embarked on a fateful journey to Stanford University, a mere hour's drive away. Little did they know that their lives were about to be brutally cut short by the cold hands of Edmund Kemper. As the car came to a halt on a desolate dirt road, Kemper's sinister intentions began to unfold. With calculated precision, he informed the unsuspecting girls that he was taking them back to his apartment. Unbeknownst to them, this would be their final destination. Inside the confines of the vehicle, a chilling scene unfolded. Kemper's murderous impulses took hold as he ended the lives of these innocent souls. Their last moments stained the car with unspeakable horror, forever etching their tragic fate into the annals of darkness.
Kemper drove them at gunpoint to a secluded area near a park. He took one of them into the woods, leaving the second girl tied in the car.
I just gone through a horrible experience with her roommate, stabbing her. And I was in shock because of that. I couldn't believe that it was that way. And I'm walking back there bewildered. I gotta kill her. I can't let her go. She's gonna tell on me. Everybody's gonna get me. She sees the blood on my hands. What are you doing? And she pulled back and she gasped. And I think, whoa, I don't want her to know what happened. I said, your friend got smart with me. She'd been getting really smart with me a lot, but I never hit her. I killed her, but I didn't hit her. I said, your friend got smart with me and I hit her. I think I broke her nose. You better come help. She's about to die. Why does she have to know that? I couldn't deal with telling her that. And when I attacked her, she didn't at first realize what was happening. It didn't go through. She had very heavy coveralls on. It knocked her right up into the lid of the car.
With his flatmate conveniently absent, Kemper devised a gruesome plan. Wrapping the lifeless bodies in blankets, he clandestinely transported them to his own room, shrouding the evidence of his monstrous acts. Within those four walls, the air became heavy with the stench of death. In his twisted quest for control and a morbid fascination with his atrocities, Kemper captured photographs of the dismemberment process. Each click of the camera immortalized the unspeakable acts committed upon these unfortunate victims. Driven by an insidious compulsion, Kemper decided to sever the heads of Mary and Anita, holding onto these macabre trophies for a time. But the weight of his deeds eventually compelled him to dispose of them, hidden within the depths of a ravine. The ravages of time and nature's cruel embrace ensured that only one of Kemper's victims, Marion, would be found and identified. The remains of Anita, forever lost to the unforgiving abyss, leaving loved ones haunted by eternal uncertainty and aching hearts.
Some of the people who are committing murders, even as we speak, if they're doing it by themselves and they tell no one about it, they could go on undetected until they decided to stop.
September 14th, 1972, Kemper encounters a defenseless 15-year-old Aiko who decides to hitchhike her way to dance class located in San Francisco. The following series of events are unclear, being that the victim is no longer with the living and unable to recount her version of events, but it is the same routine. Edmund alleges he convinced Aiko to agree to go back to his apartment, but not before making a pit stop to tie her up. Edmund even claimed the 15-year-old helped him by placing duct tape over her own mouth. He slides a revolver under the front seat and exits the vehicle, walking to the back seat of his Ford Galaxy. He accidentally locks himself out of the vehicle and panics, thinking Aiko might fear for her life and grab the gun in the front seat, but to his amazement, he claims she unlocks the door for him to enter. Kemper makes 2 attempts to strangle her as she fiercely fights for her life, but given Edmund's weight, he manages to strangle her to death with a cloth and later engaged in unthinkable acts with her corpse. He visits a bar, his mother's apartment, and after dismembering her body and decapitating her, Edmund claimed to have been visited by his parole officer, who enters Edmund's apartment for a routine checkup and never notices Aiko's decapitated but wrapped up head a few feet away from where he was standing. He later alleged that while on his way home from a psychiatrist appointment, he threw pieces of Aiko's corpse into the mountains of Santa Cruz and, a little further away, sped off as her hands disappeared into the wild. In early 1973, Kemper offered a ride to 18-year-old Cindy Shaw of Aptos, California, who was hitchhiking. He forces her by gunpoint to enter the trunk of his vehicle and fatally shoots her twice in the head, killing her instantly. He then took her body to his mother's house, who he was now living with. Luckily, she was not home. There he dismembered Cindy's body, decapitated her head, and performed unthinkable acts with her corpse. He later alleged that he buried Cindy's head face up in the garden that his mother's bedroom overlooked. Mother always said she liked it when people look up to her, he explained during interview.
I knew a week before she died I was going to kill her. and she went out to a party. She got soused. She came home, went to sleep. I was woken up by that. Came out. I walked up to her bed. She's laying there reading a paperback, as many thousands of nights before. And she said, "Oh, I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now." Shit. I looked at her. I said, "No." I said, "Good night." And I knew I was going to kill her, you know? And I was so cold, it's so hard. And that's the first time in 10 years I've looked at it that way. I mean, that intensely, that honestly. It hurts. Because I'm not a lizard, I'm not from under a rock. I came out of her vagina.
Soon after, on April 20th, 1973, Kemper had an argument with his mother, Clarnell Strandberg, at their home. Clarnell would receive the same fate as Maud Matilda Huey Kemper. In a fit of rage, Kemper bludgeons his mother with a claw hammer and slices her throat with a knife. Kemper later engaged in unthinkable acts with her decapitated head. On April 23, 1973, Kemper encountered 59-year-old Sarah Sally Hallett, Ed Kemper's last victim. She was Kemper's mother's close friend and colleague from Cornell's at UCSC. After killing and decapitating his mother, Ed telephoned Sarah Taylor Hallett, saying he wanted to surprise his mother and take her and Ms. Hallett to dinner that night. Kemper prepared for Ms. Hallett's murder and distributed weapons around the apartment, but would eventually grab her neck from behind chokehold style, lifting her from the ground. She just hung there, and for a moment, he did not realize she was dead. Edmund broke her neck instantly, leaving loose bones of her neck disconnected in a skin sack. That night, Kemper attempted to perform unthinkable acts with Ms. Hallett's body and fled the next day in her car. Kemper said he had to kill a friend of his mother's to hide the fact that they both had been murdered. Kemper then stated he had to provide a reasonable story for friends of his mother's to explain her absence. If she were away on a trip with a friend, Kemper reasoned, nobody would be concerned about her absence. Kemper's gruesome crimes and his subsequent dismemberment of the victims' bodies illustrate his extreme sadism and the heinous nature of his actions. He was eventually apprehended in April 1973 and convicted of multiple counts of murder. Kemper is currently serving a life sentence at the California Medical Facility.
Where might you be if you'd never given in to the impulse to murder?
Where might I be? If my parole had been successful, I believe I'd be married, I'd have children, I'd be heading toward my first grandchildren.